Hello my lovelies, and welcome to my little cottage by the sea, the place where I love to stitch and craft my way to a vintage inspired and sustainable lifestyle. With spring in the air, this is the time of year that I start to audit my wardrobe and make some decisions about what I'm no longer wearing, what I would like to wear, but also to attend to some of those items of clothing that maybe I'm not wearing because they need a little bit of tender loving care. I have spent the last week or so doing some make, do and mend sewing. So in this episode, I want to share my week of make, do and mend sewing. Whilst the weather is improving, some of these projects are actually more sort of autumnal, wintry based projects, but I actually quite like to get things done and then sort of lay them away for later in the year. Most of my thinking is about things that I want to wear in the coming months, but I think it's nice to have a block of time where you start to really think sustainably about your wardrobe and maybe not put off some of those projects that are quite simple to do and quite satisfying to do in between bigger projects. And this is just one of the ways in which I work. This first project is a very simple make, do and mend, and this coat, which I wear all winter, has had a lovely little bit of a zhuzh and a revamp by adding a tippet, which is a project that I did over on my Patreon with my lovely patrons, coven members. And I also made a muff and a lovely hat to go with this set. I thought that I could elevate this coat even more by adding some furry cuffs to it to go with the tippet in a lot of the leftover floof that I had from the project. And using these leftovers, which a lot of these projects involve, are a really sustainable way. They really do conform to that make, do and mend. So this is how I did it. First of all, I measured around the cuff of my coat and worked out the depth that I wanted for my fluffy cuffs. I think it was about 30 centimetres by 12ish, and I added seam allowance all the way round. I plucked up the courage to get the fluffy fabric from its bag, because the downside of using faux fur is just that you end up with basically a snowstorm of faux fur fluff all around your house. I pinned my pattern piece to the wrong side of the fabric and I cut it out, trying to only cut through the woven backing rather than the faux fur itself. You don't get rid of all the molting, but you do get rid of quite a lot. I then sewed the cuff in a round, right sides together, around the shorter seam of the cuff, and then pinned it in place on to the outside of the cuff of my coat. I spent a very pleasurable hour or so hand sewing my fluffy cuffs into place, and I was absolutely thrilled with the result. I'm very happy that I have elevated my winter coat with some fluffy cuffs. Now, once I'd completed that, it got me thinking that I'm really enjoying working on this, making outfits, whether that's thrifting, sewing, knitting things to go with pieces. It just seems to be working better for the way in which I'm dressing and putting outfits together, which in itself is a sustainable thing, especially when you're using odds and ends and offcuts, things from your stash. So I decided that even though the weather is warming up, I would spend some time making my kitten bonnet, which is a really lovely project that is very simple and quick to do. I will pop any links below for patterns, equipment, materials, anything that is relevant in the show notes below. But here is my kitten bonnet using stash fabrics and some more floof from that project that I did over on Patreon. I've made so many of my kitten bonnets over the few years that it's been published, and it's a really enjoyable, fun little palette cleanser of a project. Ghost obviously approves by placing his derriere upon the pattern. I do have it as a PDF download, and there are just a few of these paper patterns left. I'm using fabric that was very kindly given to me by Kindred Spirit and Coven member Leah. This is a Liberty print, absolutely beautiful watercolour of flowers, and I'm using this to make the lining. There's a full set of instructions inside, and it really is a very simple project to do indeed, whether or not you trim it with faux fur, but I'm going all out for fluff in this particular week of make, do and mend sewing. The outer fabric is a beautiful Melton wool that I used to make my kiddo a cape at Christmas because they specifically asked for a Hocus Pocus cape. There was quite a bit of this fabric left over, so I thought it would be perfect for this quick little project. And here I am, floofing it even more. Always good to try things on and check that they fit as you go. Even though I ended up absolutely covered in the faux fur, the needle cord of this dress seemed particularly attracted to it. It was a really enjoyable project, and I love how that lining really matches that antique dusky pink of the dress. Now, it comes as a huge surprise to me, having never been a sock person, that I am seemingly really becoming a sock person. Now, my favourite pair of socks are these sparkly ones, and I have worn them so much that the inevitable toe hole has started to appear. And using this darning mushroom that I got from my nan, I think, I've always had it, I thought I'd give repairing them a go. Although I'm showing you this as a little project that I did to mend my socks so that I don't need to get rid of them being wasteful and also losing some of my favourite things. FYI, this is not a darning tutorial. Darners of the past will be looking on in horror at the way in which I approach this particular project, but I was really pleased to get these socks back in rotation, and they are sparkly and added a sparkle to my step. project, which is the dress that I'm wearing, is really playing fast and loose with this idea of make, do and mend. But bear with me and I'll explain, and I'm sure you'll agree. The pattern that I used for this was one that I picked up in a charity shop and I amended significantly, and it really is one of my favourite patterns. I absolutely love this one. I think it's because of the square neckline, and this fabric that I've made it in is a very lovely dusky pink needle cord that is a vintage needle cord. It's a dead stock, so make, do and mend. And I've lined it in a leftover scrap of fabric from my previous projects making a vampire's wife dress over on Patreon, and I'm wearing it with my little 1920s 30s scarf, which is inspiring a whole load of outfits, which at some point I will share with you. So whilst this isn't really make, do and mend, I'm just owning it as a make, do and mend, and I bloomin' love it. I was really excited to get sewing this project, as this pattern is one of my favourites, and I was really excited to sew up this beautiful needle cord. It was very narrow and I'd originally planned to have all ruffles and puffles all over the place, but I just didn't have enough to do that. And also I didn't have enough fabric because it was so narrow to actually have side seams where I could add pockets. So unfortunately there are no pochettes in this one, but I shall just have to make do. Remove cat from project. Remove cat floof from project. Make sure that one is pinning the correct back to the correct front. I always tend to check and put onto a mildred to just make sure that everything is sitting as it should. And I'm really loving the high poofle of this sleeve. These are actually not the sleeves from the pattern, they are from my Vampire's Wife projects, and there are full tutorials on how to pattern cut those over on Patreon. Many hours of gathering, and I sewed the skirt to the bodice and then sewed the side seams and put the zip in, and then I added the lining, which I haven't actually filmed for you, but here's the finished dress and I am over the moon. Along with sorting through my wardrobe and working out what things need to be repaired or given away, put into circulation to have a better, more sustainable life, or what I'm actually going to be wearing over the next few months, I've also been sorting out my fabric stash so that I've found loads of fabric that sort of fit this colour scheme. But also there's quite a few fabrics that I am not using, and I just thought, as I was having to dye a pair of trousers that had sort of lost their colour somewhat, to not just get rid of them because I really love them, I thought I would dye those. And also this Edwardian, probably Victorian more, night dress that had been given to me has got lots of stains on it, and I just thought I'd dye those black. And my lovely friend Caroline suggested that whilst I was doing that, I just bung in some samples of these fabrics to see how they took the dye, and this is what happened. These trousers desperately need a refresh. They're the Gertie Lucille trousers, which I actually took up to make a more cropped style and really love them. This is a Victorian cotton embroidered, very beautiful night dress that needs quite a lot of TLC. I have dreams of floating around like Mia Wasikowska in Crimson Peak. I'm not sure if that's how you say her name. And these are the fabric samples that are going in. That first is a silesia, this is a plum, then there is a linen, which should take the dye really well, a muslin or voile of some kind, and then this viscose, which is a beautiful colour and suits me, but I just don't enjoy wearing it. I'm using Deighton dye. I've not used it in such a long time that they've completely changed how you actually dye your things. I weighed them to make sure that they were within the recommended weight, which they were, and then I put all into my washing machine and tried not to watch as the dye did its magic. I've put my black dress here as a comparison so we can see how the dye took. The trousers are okay, they're not as black as I would like them. This is the voile and it's a sort of more pewtery colour actually, but it did take the dye. I suppose I might need to use more than one. The muslin didn't really take it and neither did the viscose, and the silesia, well, the washing machine gremlins seem to have stolen that sample. I'm a bit disappointed with the results on this one, and maybe RIT dye is better. If you have experience and a preference between Deighton and RIT, do let me know in the comments and I would really appreciate your advice. I think this is going to have to go in the dye bath again. My final project in this week of Make, Do and Mend involves a favourite make from around October last year, and it's this wonderful vintage simplicity pattern that I made in a black crepe. I really love this dress and I am always wanting to wear it, but every time I put it on it was just too long. I needed to take it up a little bit. The thought of undoing that ruffle and re-lengthening it was daunting and it put me off, but then I had what I think is a genius idea. You may or may not agree that this is a genius idea, but let's have a little look and see what you think. Now, I got the idea of how to take up this dress from a tutorial I once gave to students about how to take up the hem of jeans so that you don't lose that top stitching and don't have to undo all the layers of denim. I worked out that I wanted to take up the dress by about the same length as the frill, and I folded this along that original seam line that I'd sewn the frill on with, and as I went I made sure that the new pin line was hidden within the old pin line. It's really hard to make this make sense, but I hope you can get an idea of what I'm doing from watching the video. I then sewed as accurately and on that original sewing line as possible, so it's the seam line that I originally sewed the ruffle to the hem of the skirt. What this should do is make sure that there's no strange little bits of seam showing on the right side, and it will look as if it's always meant to be like that. You could then overlock the seam again, but this was a little bit bulky and my overlocker's a bit temperamental at the moment, so I spent a long time with severe concentration face pinking that new seam along the edge of the overlocked seam. I'm hoping that it won't fray too much once I start washing this dress, and I was trying to show you the brilliant pinking that I was doing, but managed to not actually get that on camera very well. But I'm absolutely in love with the finished dress, and I know that this is going to be my everyday dress through the rest of spring. I still have a little bit of work to do with the dyeing of fabrics, and I will share more Make, Do and Mend with you as I work on those sorts of projects in the coming months. I hope you've enjoyed spending time with me in this episode and sharing these Make, Do and Mend projects, and if you haven't adopted that way of working on your own wardrobe, then I hope it's inspired you a little bit, even if it's just mending a hole in something, repairing a hole, or sewing a button back onto something. It's a really worthwhile thing to do. I always think of my clothes, my wardrobe, as old friends that support me on my many adventures in life. So just as I would nurture and cherish a friend in real life, I really feel it's important to do this to my clothes, because I wear a lot of things that are very old and once belonged to other people, and maybe these things that I'm spending the time making and repairing and loving will one day carry on in their adventures with somebody else. So it really is the least I can do. I'd love it if you shared your make, do and mend tips and secrets, so do so in the comment. It's always so lovely to read your feedback. You're always so very kind and supportive, for which I am incredibly grateful. And I'm also really grateful that you take the time to spend the time with me here in my little cottage by the sea. I shall see you very soon, my lovelies. Bye.